Hello, I'm Trisha from Sew Totally Trisha, and today I'm going to show you how to make these sweet little hexagon bowls. They're both based on making the exact same hexagonal size, but we've got two different shapes. One is a flat bowl and one has got small raised sides. So how did we begin? Well, first of all, I drew myself a hexagon, a large hexagon, or as large as you can make. If you've got a die cutting machine with a large hexagon die, all well and good, because you only need to cut a paper one. And then I drew a smaller hexagon within the outsides of the larger one, and I cut that out just to give me that hexagonal aperture, which we'll need later. So the first thing I did was to cut myself two pieces of fabric, two different colours, or you could do both the same colour, and one piece of wadding, which I've used spray adhesive to attach it to the reverse side. Set the template aside. Then with these two pieces I'm going to put right sides together and line up those raw edges. Pop a pin in just to hold it if you'd like to. And as I always say, I'm never going to start on a corner or a point. So I'm going to start just in from the corner, perhaps 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to stitch the whole way around. So I'm going to start first of all by reversing off there, go into the corner, and I'm using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to go the whole way around. Every time I get to the corner, I will just see that 1/4 of an inch and pivot to go round to the next side. Take my pin out as usual, lift the presser foot and go round to the next side. There. And we're on halfway round now. You'll know that I like to make things which are quick, don't take much fabric, and are quite easy to do. And as you can see, we are just stitching straight lines. Come round to my last side now. So just a little short stitch and trim that off. So I trim my threads as I go because I don't like having loads to cut off at the end. And then on the corner points, I'm just going to trim those angles off. Not too closely, but I just want to take a little bit of the bulk away so that when we press those points out, we get fairly nice. It won't be a crisp corner because of the wadding and because it's not a right angle. So then through the gap here, I'm just going to push to the right side. Just take it quite easily. And that's why I reversed when I started and stopped, just so that it doesn't come open at those points because they're taking a little bit of stress. So I just poke my finger into those points, just to poke them out a little bit as we go round. And then I shall go in with my scissors, but I don't push the point of the scissors in there. I use the side and I just push the scissor towards the corner. That way I don't risk sticking the scissors through that corner point because it's quite easily done. So push that out, push that out. Now the other thing I do with this little bit of wadding, it's just a lightweight one. You could use felt just to give it a little bit of body. Where the opening is, sometimes a little bit difficult to fold it over because we've got to close that gap. So I'm just going to open that back out and being careful of the fabric there. And I'm just going to trim off a little bit of that wadding up to 1/4 of an inch, no more, because that's just the seam allowance. And I'm just trimming that away. If you can see there, just trim that bit away. So now I can fold one edge in, just give it a little finger press there, lining that up with the seam allowance that we've taken all the way around, the 1/4 of an inch. And then the other, I'm just going to place it down on here to work with and line those edges up. Now I would go to the ironing board, but I won't today. It is always best to iron where you can. It just gives a nicer finish once you've completed the project. So I'll just pop a couple of pins in there just to hold those lines together, because what we're looking to get is a finish that you don't know where the gap was left. So I just pinned that in there to hold it together. Now I'm going to stitch all the way around the edge. As I said, a good pressing would be ideal, but I'm not going to turn my back to go to the ironing board. And then I'm just going to stitch very close to the edge. I wouldn't even say that it's 1/8 of an inch, but I want to make sure I'm catching both sides. So in this, where this gap is, I just want to look very carefully to make sure I'm going through both sides. And then just along here. Now if there's a point on your foot which you can look at, because the needle's just going up and down in the same place, just dropped off there, and come back on, and then you can actually see through. If you've got a clear foot or part of it's clear, you can actually see through to watch the margin that you want for your stitching around the edge. So one more will go there, and that's come off, and then we'll go back on here. So it's a scant 1/8 of an inch, I would call this. Okay. Nearly there. So we're back at the corner, and then just go round and again over the first 2 or 3 stitches that you started. So trim that thread off there, and the one at the back, and then I'm going to take my template again. Now if you can eyeball easily, what you could do is take your inner template and pop that on and mark the points, the 6 points at the edge of the hexagon, but I find it easier to lay my stitched piece onto the template and roughly lay that centrally. I can see that now. And then I'm going to flip it over, hold that down, and all I'm going to do is make a mark. I'll just move that a little bit. So let's just centre that again. Of course, with the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, it will be slightly smaller than the paper template we started with. So we'll do that like so, hold that down. And then in these little corner points, I'm just going to make a small mark. Now I'm using a pencil, probably a heat erasable pen or water soluble or air erasable would be better, but you're hardly going to notice these. So where I've got my points, which you probably can't see, I'm going to stitch from one point to the next. Now if you want to actually draw the lines from dot to dot, you can, but I'm just going to eyeball where I'm going. It's a straight line, and I'm just going to watch for that dot to appear, and then I'm going to swivel it round and onto the next dot. It's not a very long line either. It's all good practice. So there we go. One more. And what this is going to do, it's going to give a base to the little bowl. It will be squashing the wadding along the stitch line just to give a little bit of dimension to it. So straight across here and meet up, and I'll just do 2 more stitches over the stitches I previously did. So again, clip those threads off so you can see. Now decide which side is going to be your outer and which is going to be on the inner. And what we're going to do is, at one of the points, I'm going to fold that right sides together, and down here, where it's the point at the top, you'll come to the point that you've just stitched around on the inner hexagon. And I'm just going to stitch. I'm not going to start right at the top point, but just down from there, because that's very bulky. But I'm just going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from there, reversing a couple of stitches to start off with, and down to the point at the stitch line that we made laterally. So pop that over there, press a foot down, and as I say, reverse off a little bit and down to that line, and reverse a bit and cut the threads. Now make sure that the lining fabric is caught, so when I am folding that point in half, I'm just making sure I press that fabric in. So again, start just after the tip, otherwise it won't go. And back again, down to that point of stitching, and cut. And again on the third one, fold that in half, under the presser foot, and down we go, reverse off a bit, down to the stitch line, back, cut. It's only about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, the length of that line, so you can see how it's being very quick. So the same technique if you want to draw yourself an even bigger hexagon, or make a smaller hexagon in the centre. It just means that you'll have a bigger bowl. You could have a bowl with longer sides or with steeper sides. We're nearly down the last one. Okay, and the very last one now, just get rid of that stitching there. And fold that point. And you can really see how simple this is. So what am I going to use it for, you say? Lots of things really. It could be a little bowl on the dressing table with your jewellery in. It could be have cotton buds, cotton wool balls. It could be your thread catcher next to your sewing machine. Sweets, who said sweets? So I'm just trimming these off now. So whatever you would like it to be, and however you would like it to coordinate with your own individual decor. So here's the first one. As I say, this has got shallow sides. I'm just trimming these little bits off. As I say, otherwise it's like I'm doing now. You've got all the bits to trim off at the same time. So there is your small shallow-sided hexagon bowl. Quite sweet, don't you think? All there. And I'll now show you how to get the one with deeper sides. So I'll set that aside. So I've already done what we did earlier, which was right sides of fabric together, stitch all the way around as apart from a small gap, turn it in, clip off the corners rather, turn it inside out, trim across the gap opening, the wadding, trim it away by about 1/4 inch, turn those sides in and then stitch all the way around the top. Then mark the points to do the hexagon, the smaller hexagon within the hexagon, and now we're back to where we were originally. So this time I think I'm going to have the darker colour on the inside. So exactly the same as before, fold that corner point so it matches at the top. But this time we're going to stitch a vertical line so we can basically see a triangle. So down here, there's the triangle, and across the top. So I'm going to actually eyeball it, but you could measure, and I would say that's about 1 inch. So I'm going to pop that under the sewing machine again, and just away from the top edge, because that is quite thick, and then down to that stitch line and cut. So as you can see, what we have now is a point here. So I'll move on to the next one and fold that again, lining up that top edge and seeing down here is my stitch line. And again, under the sewing machine, you can just judge where that's going to go. Reverse at the top and reverse at the bottom and trim. And again with the next point, under the sewing machine, you can squash it as much as you like because it's going to spring back because of the wadding in there. And the next one round. Nice little Christmas gifts, nice little charity makes, any sort of giving. when you're in a hurry and you need that little gift that's a little bit different, and it's also an extra, so you might have a gift of, say, some makeup, and you want something to pop it into. Why not pop it into something like this? It's something then will last and will have quite a few different uses from the one that it was given for, if necessary. Okay, so there we are. Pop your fingers in there to straighten that out, and we have that hexagonal base. And these little corners, you can leave them as they are, or I quite like to squash them so they're a little bit more rounded, like so. Trim these little bits off afterwards, like that, and that, and that. So how about that? Isn't that cute? Similarly, it can sit within the outer bowl as well. And now I've got two similar fabrics, but quite sweet and an easy make. So thanks for watching me again. If you want to see every time my new videos come to launch, you can subscribe on my channel. You can also see me on Hexagon these days when I'm designing and making up bag kits and anything fabricy really. So watch this space and look out for more. Thanks for watching.